Okay, I want you to do something for me. Picture a typical English class. Go on, just imagine it for a second. What do you see? I bet it's a certain kind of teacher, right? A specific kind of textbook and this very clear idea of what's right and what's wrong. It's an image we all know, but today we're going to see why it might be completely out of date.
So what did you picture? Was it, something along these lines?
A teacher from the UK, or maybe the US. A huge focus on perfect, by-the-book grammar, and this deep-seated idea that there's only one single, correct version of English that everyone should be aiming for. Sound familiar? Yeah, that's the classic model a lot of us grew up with.
But what if I told you that in the real world, the world outside that classroom, English looks, sounds, and just works in a totally different way? Let's dive into the new reality of the world's most global language.
All right, let's get right into it and bust our first big myth, this idea that there's one single correct English. And to really get why this is a myth, we have to start by asking a really basic question. Who actually speaks English today?
For a long time, the way we thought about this was shaped by a model from the linguist Braj Kachru. He pictured it as 3 circles. You had the inner circle, places like the US and UK where English is the native language, then the outer circle, countries like India or Singapore with a long history of English, and finally, the expanding circle, everywhere else where English is learned as a foreign language. It was a pretty neat way to map things out.
But here's the thing. Even way back then, Kachru made what he called a linguistic guess. He predicted that the balance of power was about to shift, and shift dramatically. He said that by the year 2000, the number of people learning English would actually be bigger than the number of people born speaking it.
And wow, was he ever right. In fact, his guess was a massive understatement. Just look at the difference here. For every one native speaker, there are now as many as 5 non-native speakers. That expanding circle didn't just expand, it completely exploded. Native speakers are now a small minority of English users worldwide. Think about that for a second.
So this new reality, it has a name. English as a lingua franca, or ELF. Now, this isn't some new version of English. It's just a way of describing how English is actually used most of the time, as a bridge, a common tool for people who don't share a first language. We're talking about an office in Beijing, a university in Amsterdam, or a hostel in Sao Paulo. That's where you see ELF in action every single day.
And what's really fascinating is that when you look at how ELF is used, you start to see these common patterns. Things like dropping the S on verbs, or saying things like furnitures and advices. Now, a traditional grammar teacher would probably circle those in red pen and call them mistakes, but in the world of ELF, they're not mistakes, they're just efficient adaptations. The goal isn't to sound like a native speaker, the goal is to get your point across, to communicate successfully.
So, this huge shift in who uses English has naturally changed why they use it. Which brings us to myth number 2. Let's just shatter the idea that English is taught the same way everywhere, because the purpose of learning it has totally transformed how it's taught.
For a long time, most of us learned what you'd call general English. The whole syllabus was driven by grammar rules and vocab lists. But today, a massive area of teaching is what's known as English for Specific Purposes, or ESP. And here, the student's need is everything. Are you an air traffic controller, a nurse, a business student? Well, the English you learn is tailored directly to what you need to do your job. The content drives the language, not the other way around.
And if you want to see an even more radical version of this, look at CLIL. That's Content and Language Integrated Learning. This is huge in schools across Europe and other parts of the world. The idea is simple, but it's really powerful. You don't learn English and then learn science. You learn science through English. The language just becomes the vehicle used to learn the content.
But here's the crucial thing. CLL isn't just about getting a 2-for-1 deal on language in a subject. It's built on what they call the 4 C's. It's about using language to communicate complex ideas, using the subject to develop your cognition, your thinking skills, and understanding the culture and context behind it all. It's this whole integrated approach that makes language learning a much, much deeper exercise.
Okay, so that brings us to our final and, let's be honest, probably the most controversial myth. It's an idea that has been a dominant force in the industry for decades. The belief that the best English teacher is, by default, a native speaker.
This belief is so widespread, it actually has a name, native-speakerism. And as the researcher Adrian Holliday defines it here, it's not just a preference, it's a full-blown ideology. It's this belief that a teacher's value is tied not just to their language, but to a specific Western culture.
It's basically the assumption that your passport is a teaching qualification.
But here's the reality check. The vast majority of English teachers in the world today, we're talking probably more than 80%, are so-called non-native speakers. They're the ones on the front lines, delivering English education on a global scale. This native speaker ideal is totally disconnected from what's actually happening on the ground.
So here's a much better way to think about it. Instead of asking, where's the teacher from, we should be looking at two things that actually matter: their language proficiency and their professional preparation. The ideal teacher, what we see here in Quadrant B, is someone with high proficiency and high professional training. That's the goal. And it has absolutely nothing to do with their passport. Anyone can get there.
And this really highlights the unique and super powerful advantages that non-native English-speaking teachers have. I mean, think about it. They have actually learned English as a second language, so they get their students' journey on a deep, intuitive level. They can use the student's first language as a strategic tool in the classroom. And they have this incredible lived-in understanding of the local culture. These aren't small things. They are huge teaching strengths.
So, after busting these three big myths, what is the new reality of English in the 21st century? Let's try and put all the pieces together.
Well, the picture that emerges is way more dynamic, more decentralized, and frankly, more exciting. English is no longer the cultural property of a few inner circle countries. It's a global tool that belongs to everyone who uses it. It's a language that's defined more by its learners than its so-called owners. It's taught for a million different specific needs by skilled, professional teachers, no matter where they were born.
And ultimately, as the expert Graham Hall puts it so well, the focus is finally shifting. The future is all about competence, not about origin. It's about what teachers can actually do, their skills, their training, their empathy, not just where they come from. And this leaves us with a really fascinating final question to chew on. As the center of gravity for the English language keeps shifting, as billions of people keep adapting it for their own purposes, who gets to set the rules? Who, in the future, is going to decide what correct English even means? Now that is a question worth thinking about.